During the 7th generation, side-scrolling platformer games were starting to make a comeback. Nintendo was responsible for many of them, but you can't forget other AAA efforts like Little Big Planet. And the indie scene was huge. Gamers everywhere were celebrating titles like Limbo and Super Meat Boy. But one big contender in the AAA scene was Rayman from Ubisoft. 2 games were released on consoles, followed by multiple spin-offs on mobile. These were created with their new UbiArt framework engine, designed by Rayman's creator Michel Ancel. UbiArt framework was meant to help animators design and create content with ease. Strangely enough, the engine tools were never made available outside of Ubisoft. According to a 2019 interview with Ubisoft CEO,
the tools were difficult to use.
Alright. In early development, Rayman Origins wasn't just a callback to the series' 2D roots. It was once an episodic series that focused on the origins of Rayman. Unfortunately, during its year-long delay between 2010 and 2011, a lot of that seemed to be thrown out the window, along with other content and functionalities that would end up being scrapped. At least we have this one early trailer for the game, which happens to explain the origins of Rayman.
Woven together by us, the nymphs, destined to preserve the equilibrium of the sacred universe, the one we call Rayman.
Anyways, when Origins released, it had been 8 years since the last mainline game, Hoodlum Havoc, in 2003. Rayman wasn't completely silent between them though. Some potential sequels were in early development, but ended up being cancelled. A rabid series of events, really. Since then, Rayman games were presented in a 2D style exclusively. Michel Ancel has remarked in years past about a potential new sequel, where the characters would finally return to 3D. I'd bet some concepts were floating around internally at some point, but nothing regarding this has ever gone public. And as of 2020, Michel Ancel is retired.
Michel Ancel.
Rayman will finally be returning in 3D in the upcoming Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope DLC. For me, Rayman Origins was always this fun, temporary distraction with friends in local co-op. We'd always start again from the beginning without ever finishing it. Today, I've decided to sit through both Origins and Legends on my own for the first time. I'm using the PS Vita versions. If you decide to play these for yourself, consider that devices with touchscreens are able to experience the full potential of the games, especially so in Legends. Rayman Origins was a launch title for the Vita. No cooperative mode here. They did try to make up for this with bonus features, and we'll get into those later. For my playthrough, I only used the Rayman skin, no particular reason. There's a number of different skins, most have to be unlocked first. They're no different from one another technically, with the exception of Glowbox's skin, which seems to have a slightly bigger hitbox and attack range. The in-game storytelling is kinda vague. I had to search for a plot synopsis online to make sure of everything. So it goes like this. The Rayman crew is sitting around snoring melodically, which happens to disturb an old woman in the land of living dead. She sends out an evil army of horrendous creatures and dark tunes. Now, after having been woken up, the crew has to defeat the evil threat. However, they end up being captured. Now, imagine you're Rayman, you managed to escape from captivity, only to find the world in chaos, and your mom was put in a cage. It sucks. Remember the deity from Rayman 2 called Polocus? Well, now he's referred to as the Bubble Dreamer. The ongoing destruction of the Glade of Dreams causes the Bubble Dreamer to go bonkers. Now, in order to restore the Glade, the teensy magician tasks Rayman and his friends to gather the caged Electoons in order to cure the Bubble Dreamer and restore their home. Yeah, this guy is apparently this guy.
Hi, folks!
Origins has a pretty basic story which hardly develops during the game. Focus was certainly gameplay here. Now, in that sense, does it serve as a good sequel to Rayman 3? No. It may be a follow-up, but this ain't no Rayman 4. I'm still waiting, Murphy.
See you in Rayman 4!
The closest comparison to make from the existing series is Rayman 1, which makes a level of sense considering its development. You won't be finding the familiar dark fantasy themes present in Rayman 2 or 3, unless you count the frequent abuse of eyeballs, an unusually common and creepy focus in both games, mostly Legends. Beyond the returning characters, familiar moveset, caged friends, and two-dimensional perspective, the UbiArt games feel to be their own thing. They might have at one point been intended to reboot the series, After all, many inconsistencies came with it. A great example being the lums. This might take a while to explain, so feel free to skip forward if you don't care about the lore of Rayman's collectibles. So initially, lums made up the heart of the world. In Rayman 2, the Robo-Pirates broke the heart, which scattered its 1,000 yellow lums across the Glade of Dreams. There are only 1,000 of them, and naturally, they're supposed to stay in the heart of the world. Now, in Origins, lums are all over the place, and instead of 1,000, there's thousands. The Rayman Origins website once clarified that the pronunciation of lums is actually looms, yet the original games, for those which were dubbed, pronounced them as lums.
A silver lum!
It would make sense if these two were actually completely separate things, just with similar sounding names. But it's more likely that they decided to restart the series from scratch with new rules. Regardless, looms are beings of energy which make up the game's point system. A standard yellow loom is equal to 1, and a red loom is equal to 2. Yellow looms turn red for a brief time when collecting a Loom King, which are often surrounded by plenty of looms. Collect a predetermined amount of looms during a level to be awarded with 2 Electoon cages during the results screen. By the way, you have to sit through this 30-second animation every time you finish a level, which altogether results in about 30 minutes of screen time during a playthrough. No option to skip or fast forward. At least you can in Rayman Legends. The way I would describe Origins gameplay is fast-paced and clever. Most of its levels are composed of straightaways, so the player has countless opportunities to sustain their maximum speed. There are enemies and obstacles surrounding the environment, but this doesn't necessarily stop the player. You've got a wide variety of moves to pull off to help you explore and fight without losing any momentum. In fact, the move I would most often use is the spin attack, which actually increases momentum. In each of the first 5 worlds, there's a captured fairy that the player must free. Upon doing so, they'll be rewarded with a new move. These abilities on their own make for a pretty entertaining experience. Now combine this with the brilliant soundtrack and gorgeous art. This footage does not do justice to how nice this thing looks on my Vita. Gotta love their implementation of parallax layers too, bringing 3D space into its usually 2D world. The player is within a middle layer, with both the closest and most distant layers having a slight blur to them. With so much attention to the environment, it feels alive, like the player is just a small blip in this vibrant world. I frequently found myself getting lost in the immersion of it all. You'll never get lost in the game itself though. Every puzzle, every mechanic, has an easy, understandable introduction, putting you in the simplest possible situation first. Oftentimes afterwards, the game then greatly expands on that idea. Most of these efforts are so obvious that the player doesn't usually need to slow down at any point. Figuring this all out in a short enough time that your momentum isn't affected makes you feel like a platforming genius. Inevitably though, the player will come to a stop on occasion, as you're required to break open cages, which are often found in secret rooms that are separated by a load screen. You can prepare for these in advance by keeping an ear out for their cries of help. Help me! Then it's just a matter of finding the secret entrance. Help me! Most of these are, by the way, quite easy to find. It may sound like a cakewalk, but I wouldn't say that's the case. I remember one instance where there was a cage in an innocent-looking secret room, but moments after entering the main area, some jellyfish eel creature came out and followed my every move. You can expect a lot of wacky tricks like this throughout the game. One repeating event worth mentioning are the rides with your pal Mosquito, which often lead you into a boss fight. These sessions play like a shmup, and a pretty darn good one at that. I tended to switch to the Vita's analog stick for these, as well as for the underwater segments. Much easier to control 360 degrees that way. Should you take a hit, you'll expand into a bubble and pop. In co-op, you could hit their bubble to revive them, much like the new Super Mario Bros. Series. Rayman can add a second hit point by breaking a heart vial, of which there are many throughout its levels. Another similarity to New Super Mario are the skull coins available on each level, which amount to 25 looms each. Collecting one doesn't give you the looms right away. You need to stay away from danger for a couple seconds first, in order to prove that you're not cheaping out the puzzle involved to get it. That's pretty smart design there. I had the expectation to find this game repetitive eventually. After the first few hours, you may start to feel like it's thrown all its punches. Once the 5th world is completed, you'll unlock the remaining subworlds, which reuse a lot of art from the earlier worlds. By this point, you've seen most of what there is to see. Now don't get me wrong about this, the remaining worlds are still a lot of fun. Do consider that I was playing the game, for the most part, from front to back, with a couple of breaks in between. I always enjoyed jumping back into it, no matter what point of the game I was at. Now it's time for the top 4 things I don't like about Rayman's Oranges. Number 4. Rayman bounces after getting hit, and this often causes him to get a second hit from some other nearby danger. Number 3. After finding a Loom King, the looms start to bounce all over the place. You aren't able to anticipate the movement of those that are currently off screen, and those can often be the difference between a fully complete and incomplete level. Number 2. Tentacle claws can screw right off. And number 1. Trial and error. Seriously, there are many moments where you have to do things to the exact intention of the developers. Just how was I supposed to predict that? It's often about momentum, needing to match a specific speed and not to grab a ledge even one time, else you've broken the sequence. A lot of the game's unfair moments can be forgiven due to the fact that there's unlimited lives and plenty of checkpoints. You can deliberately die to restart a section without any penalty. That doesn't mean some parts aren't still annoying or frustrating though. Once you reach the end of the game, what is happening? In each world you can collect a skull tooth by completing a tricky treasure stage. These are basically races with this container dude. Collect them all to unlock the final Livid Dead Stars tour. These are ultra difficult, fast-paced levels that take place underneath the Snoring Tree. The last level here is considered the game's true final stage, with its own boss fight. I checked this part out online and it looks neat, but I'm not going to delay my Legends playthrough for it though. Now before we move on to Legends, here are some Vita-specific bonuses in Rayman Origins. Throughout the game you'll hear this clicking, rattling sound. And what this indicates is that there's a relic nearby. Relics contribute to 2 murals in the Snoring Tree, which, when complete, give the player an exclusive cutscene. To find a relic, carefully investigate the screen while hearing the noise. The closer you are, the louder it is. Once you've located one, just tap it on the screen, and it's yours. About those unlockable cutscenes, they once had subtitles which weren't in the game, but Ray Carrot managed to find them in the files. One's about Rayman's hair being made up of creatures known as the Mini-Villi. Curiously, there's another limbless character in the cutscene named Raynette. Did Batilla create her as well? The other cutscene is about how Globox was originally red, but turned blue after being stung by a venomous creature. Now, if Globox and his wife are actually red, then how come their babies are more often blue? Continuity just does not exist in this universe, does it? The Vita version also includes Ghost Mode, where you can race against the ghost of someone at Ubisoft. Their scores are pretty easy to beat. This mode serves as a compensation for the lack of cooperative. It contains only portions of the original levels, and not all of the game's levels are available, just 3 from each world. If you die while playing this mode, there's no checkpoints, so you're sent back to the start. And that's Rayman Origins, or at least that's all I have to say about it. Now it's time for Rayman Legends. Over the years, I've had much less experience with this one. The execution feels notably different from Rayman Origins. Sure enough, Origins was put together by 3 different Ubisoft studios. Legends, on the other hand, was handled exclusively at Montpellier, which is the home of Rayman's creator, Michel Ancel. How do you actually pronounce that? I've always just kind of assumed.
Michel Ancel.
Michel Ancel. Alright, I hope I can remember that. So initially, Ubisoft was unsure of Rayman Legends' home platform. It seemed to be intended as a Wii U exclusive, but according to Ubisoft's CEO, consideration of other platforms came up when their other Wii U game, ZombiU, received poor sales. That game has a fascinating story behind it. Did you know that it was planned to be a multi-platform Raving Rabbids spin-off? It's as if the internal team had a distaste for how many Rabbids sequels were being pumped out. The funniest part about this is how the concept of violent Rabbids has been cancelled twice. Anyways, Rayman Legends was delayed to have a simultaneous launch with Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, but at the time, the Wii U version was reportedly already finished. Resulting from this, fans actually started to protest. Rayman's creator Michel Ancel was actually photographed with the protesters, and to me that implies that this was less of a developer issue and more of a Ubisoft issue. The UbiArt framework tool was updated for the development of Legends. It now has dynamic lighting and 3D model support. Impressive stuff. It's the perfect blend of 2D and 3D. Now, you might be wondering why the remainder of this video is so short. Well, the truth is, I did write and record a review of Rayman Legends, but I'm not fond of how it turned out. In the end, I found myself comparing it too closely with Origins and why I thought that game was better, which is a minority opinion. In fact, Rayman Legends is often considered one of gaming's best 2D platformers. But I don't quite understand why. The level design feels like a downgrade, pacing is all over the place, and its gimmicks often overstay their welcome. Nevertheless, I don't think 10 minutes of questioning Legends' design is a valuable use of anyone's time. I did enjoy the game overall, it'd be hard not to if you liked Origins, in which case, I do recommend giving Rayman Legends a try. Now my question to you is, if you've played these games before, which one did you like better? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to hear more from me in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. See you next time!